all kinds of.
Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 28th of January 2008, approximately 10 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
William A. Hunt, Jr., 77, born in 1930, 10/25/30, and
Where?
Troy, New York.
Right, okay. What was your educational background prior to going into service?
I had all of high school, and I was in the middle of my apprenticeship for a funeral directing license, New York State funeral directing license, when my name come up on a draft. I had to go in, actually it was 6 months through on my apprenticeship, and I figured I'd better get in and get it over with. I knew it was going to come eventually, so I went in April. I think this was February, and I quit my job figuring I'd be called the next month, and it didn't happen that way. So I couldn't get a job then because Class A and on the list, so to speak. So finally I went down to the draft board and volunteered to be drafted.
Oh, okay.
Went in that way. And I was lucky enough to go with a bunch of fellows that I grew up with and went to school with.
Mm-hmm. Now, why don't you show us that right now? I guess that's kind of a unique photograph. That's the...
Well, this is...
why don't you show us the first one there?
This is the draft group. I hope my fingers aren't in the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's April 18th, 1951. It's in front of the old Troy Hotel.
Now, do you want to point to yourself in that picture?
Let me see if I can find me. On the second row, right there. I think you can see it
You can hold it back.
under my finger.
Okay,
The leather jacket.
okay.
Now, how did you end up with that photograph?
My dad, luckily, my dad worked for the Troy Record, which was the local newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And when he saw me getting drafted, he got the original print from the record, which this is. And I've made copies from that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have the same group, right there. This is the same group in uniform in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, where we were inducted.
Okay, is that everybody in that photo, or was there others added from different parts
Well,
of the
there
country?
might have been one fellow missing. I think there was one fellow that was pulled out to go into intelligence for some reason. I can't remember his name. But.
Okay.
And then I also have a group picture we were in. This is some of the same fellows. They were all from Troy, New York, or Cohoes. And we were in a squad tent in what they call North Camp in Fort Hood, Texas. We were living in squad tents with wooden floors.
Now, are you in that photo?
Yes, yeah, I'm the one squatting in the front.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so you were drafted, you can put that down now, in April of '51. You went to Devens, that's where you were sworn in. Where did you go from there for your basic?
We went by train. Everybody traveled by train in those days down to Fort Hood. And I wound up in North Camp. A bunch of us for basic training in North Camp, which was Kent's. And I think it was 8, I'm not sure, it was 8 or 16 weeks for basic. That's so long ago, I kind of forget. But at the end, or nearly the end of that time, they interviewed us as to what we wanted to do while we were in the service. And of course I was trained as a funeral director, or trying to be a funeral director, and I opted to go with graves registration.
So you volunteered in a way?
In a sense, yeah.
Yes.
I wanted something that
Yes.
that I knew, and I knew there was a lot of fellows who wouldn't like that kind of work, you know. So I figured maybe I'd have a job opening. And actually, about 3 or 4 days before the end of my basic, we were supposed to go through the infiltration course once in the morning, once in daytime, and once at night. And we went through in the daytime. I was still a member of the 100th Tank Battalion at the time, and when I got back to my company, I'd been transferred to the medics. I was in the medics for 3 days, I guess, about 3 days, and the sergeant that was in charge of me at the time, because I'm just new and just out of basic, he said I was the only fella that so far that they had in the medics that had any medical training at all, and all my medical training was for the funeral end of the business. So it was funny that night, I was only there, as I could say, about 2 or 3 days. They brought a colored fella in, and he was beat up something terrible. And the sergeant asked me to take him down to the latrine and take a shower with him and kind of clean him off so that they could see what the damage was. And I went down with him, cleaned him all up, and got him back into bed at the medics. And of course, you get talking to somebody, ask him how the hell it happened, you know. He says, I'm colored. He says, I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing. He says, I was hitchhiking down here, and this was around Fort Hood, which was Texas, and back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And he says, they picked me up for hitchhiking, and the 2 deputies took him over to a gravel pit and beat the hell out of him over there. And of course, every time they hit him, he'd go down on the stones, and it would mar his uniform and his body up. But a couple of days later, I was transferred back to Graves Registration, but Graves Registration was at the other end of the camp, that is in where the permanent barracks were. And I went to my commanding officer and asked him if I could possibly go through the night course with the infiltration course with the people I was trained with, rather than having to do it later. So he said, sure, you can do that. And I started to go to meet with these fellas, and the sergeant said to me, you can't take a weapon with you now, you're in the medics. So in the morning I had to go through the infiltration course, carry a weapon and a pack, and at night, because I had transferred into the medics, all I had was an armband around my arm with a red cross on it, and went through at night with, as far as they were concerned, I was a medic. And then a couple of days later, I guess I got my transfer to Graves Registration. When I reported to that company, it was what they call a field service company. There was Graves Registration section, which was 2 sergeants, and I think there was 11 of us, 11 fellas. And we serviced the whole division if we were to go into action. And this field service company, they also had a coffee grinding unit where they grind 100 pounds of coffee at a time, and we had a bread making. They make 2,200 loaves of bread every day, and you had the field shower unit, and this was all the same fellows doing different jobs in this company. And of course, as I say, we were Graves Registration, and there wasn't much Graves training, really. Part of my job was to take a armored carrier, you know, not a Jeep, but it's not a truck either, remember and I couldn't drive, but I had a guy take me out in the country, and we dig up a couple of trees and bring them back, try and beautify the company area. And that didn't last very long, because you watered them and they die anyway. But eventually, they sent me what they call a TO&E when you go for training somewhere else, sent me up to Fort Lee, Virginia. And again, you traveled by train in those days, and I had what they call a roomette, which was just a seat, and of course the seat changed into a commode if you needed it, and then made your bunk at night. And that was a couple of days on that, going up by train. And they had taken care of my luggage. All I had to do was put it in the duffel bag. When I got up to Fort Lee, They picked me up at the station and I checked in and I was assigned my barracks and all of that kind of stuff. And this was an 8-week course up there for grade registration. And so there was one other fella with me from my company. And anyway, a couple days into the thing, my duffel bag hadn't shown up. And I had given the corporal at this, where the camp, wherever the headquarters where I was, my baggage stubs and so forth. And in fact, they still have some of the actual railway ticket. But anyway, they couldn't find my clothes. A whole duffel bag full of clothes, civilian clothes, and my whole issue of Army clothes, except for the Class A uniform I was wearing. So I went to the sergeant major, and I said, you know, no matter where you are in the Army, someday you're going to have to pull KP. And I said, I know my name is going to come up. I certainly can't pull KP in a Class A uniform. Well, he says, I guess if worse comes to worse, we'll have to give you a cook's outfit. You know, the whites with the big hat and everything. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, of course, the wheels are turning, you know. So they still couldn't find my clothes. And this sergeant major says, I want you to write a letter down to your commanding officer and tell him the problem you're having, which I did. I got a copy of his letter back to me. He told me to have what they call a report of military survey done on my lost clothes, and wish me luck with my problem. So I had to go find a warrant officer, Tracy. He was the guy that more or less took care of me. I went down to, you know, you've seen JAG on television. Well, this is the Army part of JAG. I had to go down there and swear that I was telling the truth and that I had lost my clothes, and that if I was lying, I was liable to military court-martial and all of the rest of this stuff. So when I come out of there, they gave the order for this sergeant to take me over to quartermaster, and they gave me a whole complete new outfit except for the Class A uniform I'm wearing. So, of course, in the service, when you get something like that, we used to have to print your, or stamp H, which is my initial from my last name, and last 4 numbers of your serial, or your Social Security number in your clothes. So I started to do that. And then I'm thinking, well, geez, now I got everything, I don't have a duffel bag to put all of this stuff in. I don't have laundry bags. That's what they call company supplied them. I don't have a field jacket, which is company supplied. I don't have a overcoat, which is company supplied. So I go trotting back over to this warrant officer, Tracy, and he happens to be paying everybody else, you know, and I break into the pay line and I salute him and, sir, I got a problem. He says, I know. He says, you were in here once with a problem. I thought I'd get that straightened out. What's your problem now? Well, I says, it's getting closer. My time is passing, you know, while this is going on. I got the new clothes, but I'm still going to classes every day. And I said, it's getting closer to the end of this 8 weeks. I got to get this straightened out. So he said, what's the problem? Well, I told him. I said, I don't have a duffel bag and all of this company equipment. So he turns to this sergeant. He was working with him. He sent him out to the local surplus store to give me a duffel bag. And they still couldn't find the barracks bags, you know, for use for laundry bags. And I still didn't have an overcoat. So he sent me back to duty, and I wind up on KP the next day. So I go over to report into the KP pusher with the complete white cook's outfit on, you know. And again, the wheels are turning. Well, I happen to remember that the KP pusher changed at noontime. And we all had these little student tags with our names on them. And it didn't matter what class you were going to, you still had a student tag. So I slipped the student tag on, and I was making salads and soups and everything else instead of washing pots and pans. And I got away with that 2 or 3 times before I got caught. But anyway, as I say, time is passing. I'm getting closer and closer to going back to Texas, and I'm still not straightened out. So I get back over to Mr. Tracy, and I said, sir, I said, they finally got everything I need except my overcoat. I gotta have an overcoat. Well, that was when the Army was just changing from the old style to a new, like a nylon overcoat, and they couldn't find any, then, or they hadn't been issued. So he sent me over to the stock room, supply room, and he says, you tell that sergeant that's in charge over there that I told him to tear that goddamn place apart and find you an overcoat. He says, I don't care what it is, find you an overcoat so you got something to put in the bag, and if somebody asks, it's there, whether you can wear it or not. Well, we went over there, 3 of us, a corporal, a sergeant, and myself. We tore that place apart, and we finally found one of these World War I wool greatcoats. You remember those? And that's what they gave me to complete my issue. So back to my barracks and stamping my name into all of this stuff. And this was like 2 or 3 days before the end of my classes.
Now, what kind of classes were you taking? I mean, what did you learn in these classes?
Well, of course, I had some basics as far as I went to school for funeral directing, and we learned how to, like, measure. I mean, the width of the eye is equal to the width of the nose is equal to the width of the eye. And you're from your hairline to the top of the nose, from the top of the nose to the bottom of the nose, and from the bottom of the nose to the tip of the chin. They're all approximately the same measurement. And this is where you start with, like, rebuilding a face, or, well, it all comes into identification later on and that kind of stuff, which was what we did. Search, recovery, and identification of, that's what we were supposed to be doing if we were in action. And that's what the classes were all tuned to. Fingerprints, naturally, fingerprints and teeth charts was the best thing as far as identification. Now, of course, you got DNA, which we didn't have in those days. We did have a fluoroscope machine when we were overseas in the British Registration Company, and that was for if you had any temporary burials and you had to dig somebody up, you'd use the fluoroscope machine to find out where the dog tag was. Sometimes they'd stick it in a man's mouth, other times they'd stick it in a canteen and bury the canteen next to the fella. We were told that the boots would last longer than anything else as far as the body was concerned, so most fellows would put their names in their boots. But still, that's not definite identification, that's supportive. Like somebody has a driver's license, that's supportive identification, that this is that certain party. The only thing you could actually depend on was teeth charts, fingerprints, and now, of course, DNA. But when I was overseas, I'm going to get back, finish the story on the clothes. About 3-4 days before I was supposed to be rotated back to Texas, the CQ sent somebody over to my barracks and, hey, Hunt, you're wanted over at CQ right away, something important. So I go over there and report in, and the sergeant says to me, they found your clothes. I go, holy Jesus, am I in trouble? You know, here I got a whole new issue, and they're finding my first bag. What the hell am I going to do with 2 issues of clothes? So, of course, I go trotting over to Mr. Tracy again, and he happened to be paying off again, and I had to break into the line again, report to him, sir, I got a problem again. For Christ's sake, what this time? I said, they found my original clothes, sir. I said, what do you want me to do? I said, I don't want to be in any kind of trouble and owe anybody any money. So he says, look it, as far as we're concerned here, you've got 1 issue of clothes. As far as Texas is concerned, you've got 1 issue of clothes. get the hell out of my office. And that was the end of it. So I wound up with 2 complete issues of clothes except for the one Class A uniform. Now I'm thinking, well, I'm going home on 10 days leave now. See, 10 days delay en route before I go back to Texas. What the hell am I going to do with 2 bags of clothes? So I went to, in those days it was Railway Express was the big thing. You know, nowadays it's UPS or one of them. But anyway, I took 1 bag down to Railway Express and shipped it home to my home, and I carried the other one myself. And then I figured, geez, now I go back to Texas, I can't wear all new clothes. They'll know something is wrong. So I had to take all of that stuff and line it up in my home and switch here and there and everything, so some of the stuff looked a little bit worn, you know, so that I could get by when I reported back to Texas. And nothing ever came of it, but in those days I was like 21 years old. I was scared to death I was in some kind of trouble, but it never happened. So after I got back to Texas, finished my training there, and what happened, there were actually the 1st Armored Division, which was what I was in, was grossly over, in other words, like the company I was in, there was about 1.5 times the number of men that they actually needed. So all of those fellows eventually were shuffled out, and I think there was about 1,800 of us left on the whole base. And what they did was cut the country in half at the Mississippi River. Anybody whose home was east of the Mississippi went to Europe. Anybody who was west of the Mississippi went to Korea. And Willie Shows, I don't know if you noticed it there, but he and I were real buddies for the whole 18 months that we were together. And he was from New Orleans, so we were both going to Europe. And we got 33 days leave before shipment over there. We were supposed to report back to Camp Kilmer. And I figured, we're saying goodbye, you know, in Fort Hood. Figured never see him again. So, of course, after being in the Army for a while, you realize that if you're going to a new base and you get there early, if you can get into the cadre rooms, you've got a little privacy, you know, especially if you're just a GI. So I was lucky I got down there in Kilmer early and headed for one of these barracks. And as soon as I walked in the door, there's Willie sitting there waiting for me. We thought we'd never see each other again. And here, coincidence, we get back together. We had to fall out every day for when they announced the names, you know, of who was on the next shipment, that kind of stuff. And there was a bunch of guys who they'd rat out, go to New York if somebody else called them, if their name came up for the next day, and try to get back in time, you know. I never got into that kind of stuff. But anyway, Willie, we got friendly with a red-headed sergeant. I can't think of his name now, so long ago. But he was head of the guard on this ship going over, General Patch. And it was a big, big ship. And I got a green tag there. I don't know if you fellas noticed it. There was 163 on it. Well, 162 were the guys ahead of me, and they were what they call the advanced group. They were the guys that did the KP and all of the stuff to keep the Army going while they were on the ship. And I was lucky I wasn't included in that. I missed it by 1. But I did get duty as a guard on what they call the promenade deck. We had a bunch of officers and their wives and families traveling with us. And my job was to stand on the deck. We had these military MP helmets and suntans that we dressed in. And we were just supposed to keep order, so to speak. And you'd pull duty from like 1 o'clock today to 2 o'clock, and then the next day it'd be 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock to 4, and so forth. We were 9 days going over to Germany. Went into Bremerhaven, And I'll tell you another thing I remember. This was an old ship, but it was a big one. And they used to press the button on the bridge. They'd give us warning that they were going to close the watertight doors. And they'd press this button and the alarm would go off, and you had like 15 seconds to get into your compartment, and then these watertight doors would close. Man, what a feeling. I can't swim. That used to scare the hell out of me. Because like a picture was a torpedo hitting the side of the thing and the rest and everybody going down, you know. But that was quite a thrill when those doors closed. But anyway, we got over to Bremerhaven, and as they say, Willie and I were still together. We were sent down to Sonthofen, which was a repo depot, and there was a lot of Polish DPs in there. You couldn't have a camera because they didn't want you taking pictures of these guys who still had families behind the Iron Curtain. And we were high up in the Alps. In fact, we were so high up that you could look down and see the planes going between the peaks. And there was a bunch of Hawaiian fellas that were on the same ship with us. They came from Hawaii to the west coast to Camp Kilmer on a boat to Germany. And this was up in the Alps, and it was September, and it was pretty chilly for me even. And these poor guys, I suppose their blood was still Hawaiian blood, you know, rather than having the difference in the... Anyway, they had every piece of clothing they could find on them. And we were there for, probably a week or 10 days, sorting everybody out to where they were going to go from there, you know. And Willie took care of, had his family to take care of, so most of what money he had, he sent home. And of course me, I had nobody but myself, so I always had money in my pocket. And wherever we went, if he didn't have any money, I took care of it. But the last night, I'll never forget this, we were in Sonthofen, and they had like an enlistments club. You know, you could go play bingo or whatever you wanted to do, shoot pool. Anyway, they had a couple of games, guessing games, to heat things up, and then the last thing was bingo, and it was $1 a card. And I remember Willie didn't have the $1, so I put the $1 in for him. And there must have been 300 guys in the room, and everybody had a card playing bingo. Well, the big prize was a hand-carved cuckoo clock. And if you've ever seen a German cuckoo clock that's hand-carved, you know what I'm talking about. This thing was beautiful. They already had it packed in. We used to have that chipped wood. I can't think what they call it now, but used to use that for packing. And it was all packed up. All they had to do was slap the lid on it. So we played the T, we played the X, we played around around the card. And the last game was the coverall. So everybody had to stand up. And the last number called was the guy who won the cuckoo clock. Well, everybody sat down. Who the hell wins it but Willie? On my buck. So he was going, he had orders to go the next day, and he, of course, was going somewhere else other than where I was assigned. He was a cook, and of course, that's a hell of a lot different than a funeral director. But anyway, he came to me and he says, Billy, he says, will you do me a favor and send that clock home for me? I said, sure, I can do it, I guess. And I think it cost me $6 and change to send the damn cuckoo clock home, which I paid for in the beginning. And the funny part, just before that hurricane that killed New Orleans a couple of years ago.
Katrina?
Yeah, well, his home was wiped out by the hurricane, and I hadn't heard from him in years. And when I heard about the hurricane, I thought, well, or maybe it was just before that, even though we were in our 60s and 70s, I wanted to get in touch with him if he was still alive. So I took a flyer, I wrote a letter to the mayor of New Orleans, told him who I was, and I said that you're a busy man, and I was told that busy men can get things done, so I'd like to know if this fellow is still alive. He was in your area in the 50s when I knew him, and we were close in the service. Well, I got a nice letter back from him, and he was glad to help, and told me that Willie was still alive. He was here's another coincidence. He was retired from the fire department, and he lived still. He gave me his address and his telephone number. But the funny part of it is, when I got out of the service, I was still wanting to get into the funeral business, and at that time, the firemen could work one day on and one day off. So technically, that would be great for me if I could get on the fire department. I could still run my business and may have an income too until the business took off. And I tried to get on the fire department, but I couldn't make it. My weight wouldn't let me. So I went to work this is after I got out of service, of course. I went to work for a boat yard. We built tugboats on the Hudson River. Of course, now there's no boats on the river, but in those days, in the late 50s.
Was that the Matin shipyard?
Yeah, I worked at Matins for 16, 17 years. And we built tugboats for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and he built some for himself. And I think it was 55. I'd been out of the service a couple of years. They had portable X-ray units that TB was a big thing in this whole area in those days. So they wanted everybody 100% to go and have an X-ray taken, which they set up in the yard, in the shipyard, and everybody got a picture taken. We got 100% on it. So that was in October, I think, and just before Christmas, I get a letter from the health department to go to the county health department and have a big X-ray taken. So I figured, geez, maybe my metal might have gotten away or something like that, you know. I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't sick. So I went down and they took my picture, and just before Christmas, I got a call from the health department to go and see my doctor, my personal doctor. And I just gotten married. My wife was pregnant. And I walked into the doctor's office, and he looked at me and he said, "You have failed." I didn't know what the hell he's talking about. I felt fine, you know, nothing wrong with me. He looked at me, he says, "I got to tell you, Billy," he says, "you got TB." And he says, "You got the type that if you don't get it treated, you're going to be dead in 6 months." So, naturally, I opted for the treatment. And luckily, as I said, at that time, TB was a big thing. And we were told when I was in France not to eat off the base. If you wanted to go to a restaurant or something like that, don't. I only ate off the base once. And I think that was the one that did it. Because over there they use human excrement on their farms. And it's the only thing I can think of, although I went through the physical when I was discharged with no problem. But they found the TB in me just a little less than 3 years after my discharge. So technically, I was still service-connected because of the 3-year allowance on it.
Now, your job in Graves Registration, did you have to exhume bodies?
No. We were never into that kind of stuff. We were never in that. We were never in action. We were never in any. When I was in school, we had a couple of bodies that were sent in, and a couple of just the heads and hands for reconstruction purposes and that kind of stuff. But the one thing about Graves Registration, when we were coming across Germany on the Autobahn, every once in a while we would stop and bivouac overnight. Well, most places the guys would either sleep in the cab of their truck or they sleep under the truck or whatever, you know. We had it nice. We'd open up the stretchers, you know how your stretchers are folded, and we'd set them across between the sides of the truck in the the wooden slats, you know? And we'd have 3 or 4 stretchers, one after the other, and then we'd pile we had these dummies made out of fatigue uniforms stuffed with straw, and then tied off at the legs and the arms, which we used for dead. And we used those for mattresses. We had a nice sleeping setup.
That must have looked kind of bizarre.
It did, but it worked. We were in, we came across the country from Germany to Verdun, France, and we were in tents there. And then I was, of course, I'm still new to the company. I was only in the company maybe 3 weeks, and there was a Sergeant Crowder. I think I mentioned him in my thing there. He was a hell of a nice guy, but he'd look at you, and he had the other eye going this way. And he was a member of a family that owned a powder manufacturing company in just outside of, it was in Hopewell, Virginia. His family, he'd been in the service long. But anyway, I guess he put me in charge, or got my name to be considered for, they wanted to go through the TO&E of the whole company. They had just gotten into France, and we had a building, not a Quonset hut, but it's something similar to a Quonset hut. I only got a picture there of the front of it. This was, maybe 20 yards long and maybe 15, 20 yards wide, and it was built up on cement blocks, and then 2 4x4s out of that, and then the building on top of it. And there was 3 of us, a Sergeant Troutline, me, and another fellow. And we had all of well, there was 5 companies, 4 companies and a headquarters company, and all of their equipment was in this building. We had it separated by company, and we had to go through, inventory everything, any like shovels and picks and whatever needed painting or repair, we had to take care of that. Anything that was busted or needed replacement, we put in an order for. Went through the whole thing, and the idea was that if higher command ordered a red alert, each truck would come to the back, so many trucks per platoon, they would come to the back of this building, and they would load that particular platoon's equipment so that everything was in its place, and it wouldn't take any time at all to load and go wherever we were ordered to go. And I remember one time we went out on one of those things, and it was just like the Red Ball Express. You've heard of what Red Ball Express in Second World War? You didn't stop for anything. You went, and once any civilian stuff got in the way, you just ran over it. I mean, we were told, they were warned to stay the hell off the roads when the red ball was going on, but nothing stopped us when we started. And this one truck hit what they call a honey wagon. Boy, did they get a thrill.
You alluded to this before we went on tape. The Army at this time was integrated with a lot of blacks. You had a lot of blacks in your units.
The reason I remember that more than anything, when we were trucked into South Camp, that is the white boys, and the color boys, they had to walk from the train station, which was I don't know, maybe 20 miles to South Camp, or North Camp, where the tents were. Now this was before integration. They had their own unit at that time. Then later on, this was in stateside. When I got to Europe, the unit I was in was integrated. It was colored and white fellows. But I never had any trouble. I always treated everybody the same as they treat me. And as I said, the colored fellows, mostly they drove trucks. A lot of them were cooks. We had a military script when we were over there rather than American money.
Mhm.
And I remember one day I got up and looking down, it was wooden floor. I had half a $50 bill, half a $10 bill, half a $20 bill, all over the floor of my tent. So I figured, what the hell, I'll pick it up. No good, you know what I mean? You can't spend it unless you got the other half. Finally, a color fella come in. He said, "Hey, did you find any money?" I said, "Well, I found some money, but only half." Well, he says, "I got the other half." He says, "I got drunk last night." And he says, some way or another, all of my cash got torn up. And in fact, there's military script. And he says, if you got it,
Well, wait, he's got to focus on it.
oh, okay.
Okay, got it.
So it's gonna need, has a need over.
Okay.
He says, if you found it, he says, let's stack it up, and he said, I'll split it with you. So paid me to pick up the money. But I had a lot of fun. I mean, I went over there like a tourist, really. I spent 7 months and 11 days. And to get back to the tuberculosis, I spent a year in the hospital, which Uncle Sam paid for.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go to the VA in Albany. I had the option of going to a civilian, which was a county hospital at the time. I could have gone to the VA in Albany, but they had, it was on the 11th floor. You had to wear yellow pajamas, and if you had visitors, they and you would have to speak through a gauze mask plus a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured that was like being in jail, you know? So I didn't want anything to do with that. Of course, things changed later on when they got the treatments going on the TB. But I opted to go to Pauling Sanitarium, which was up in Rensselaer County. And they took care of everything as far as the payment or anything like that goes. I think it was about 6 months. They had a kind of standard, I guess you'd call it. If you had you take an x-ray a month, and if you had 6 x-rays that they could place one on top of the other, place a light through it, and there was no change, then you could be you had the option of going for the operation.
Mhm.
Now, the reason that I picked the operation, I had just gotten married. My son wasn't even born yet. In fact, he was born while I was in the hospital. And I saw a lot of fellas, not my age, but older, who had TB, would go into the hospital and they'd get them straightened out and on a decent diet, and then they figured they're getting better, and they'd go out, and first thing you know, they're on the street again, or they're drinking, and they're right back in the hospital. So I didn't want any of that yo-yo stuff. So I opted for the operation, and they sent me out to Homer Folks Hospital, which was in Oneonta at the time. Of course, now it's gone. There's no TB hospitals anymore like they were then.
Mhm.
I think today it's a girls' school out there, or some girls out in New York City. But I did lose part of my right lung, which makes me eligible for the Disabled Veterans, which I am a member of. In fact, I'm Senior Vice Commander, Chapter 38, or Kelly Post. I'm also in the VFW, Commander of the Latham Memorial Post, 7411.
Oh, have you ever had any reoccurrence at all? Or?
No, I've been lucky. I mean, the VA follows me. I haven't had an x-ray now in about 5 years, but the only thing that, I don't say bothers me, but every once in a while, as long ago as the operation is, that's 56, that's nearly, what, 60 years, 50 years. Every once in a while I'll still blow my nose and I'll still get a spattering of blood.
Mm-hmm.
I can breathe all right. I won't say that there are are times that I get short of breath, you know, that,
Mhm.
of course, my age doesn't
Yeah.
help either. But I think it was the best thing that I ever did to get it taken care of. The only thing I'm mad about, I went to, at that time the VA was over in the Arsenal, the office of the VA. And I was getting 100% disability while I was in the hospital, which was at that time $202 a month. And I went down there and they cut me down to $67. Now nobody ever told me that I should go to the VA and have it,
Appealed?
no. I was given $67 a month. I figured that must be for arrested TV because it's cut out, it's arrested, okay? So I settled for that, but I was a goddamn idiot. I never had, see the way this came up, years later, this was back in '66 I guess, because they went like 5 years on 100% and then it went down after 5 years to 50% and then a couple of years it went down further. But anyway, I wound up with $67 a month for a long time. About '96, I think it was, I get the DAV magazine, and 10% disability called for $92 at the time, I think it was, something like that. Anyway, I called the VA, and, or no, what it was, they come up with this means test. See, I never had to have a means test because I was service connected, okay? Then they sent me a letter about this means test. So I called down there and I said to the girl, I'm service connected, I shouldn't have to fill out a means test. I said, that's only for guys who aren't service connected. So she punched me in the computer and she said, yeah, Mr. Hunt, you're service connected. And she says, we're carrying you at 10%. So it didn't gel then, you know, but I got to the DAV magazine and it said you should be getting $92 a month for 10% disability. So what the hell is the idea here? I'm getting 67, I should be getting 92. Something's wrong here. So I went down to, I think his name was Jewel, he was the National Service Officer for the VFW. I had another appointment for something else, and I went in to talk to him. Told him what was going on, and of course, by this time, everything is computerized, you know. So he says, well, go on up with your appointment. He says, check back with me before you go home. So I went up, I come back downstairs, and he says, you've never been evaluated. I said, what do you mean? I said, I've been getting $67 a month for years and never evaluated. I said, something is wrong. I said, they're carrying me at 10%, and the book says I'm supposed to be getting 92. What the hell is going on here? Well, he says, they're carrying you at 10%. That don't mean it isn't in the, in other words, I'm not rated at 10%. So he put me in for the regular, the whole physical and the whole thing, you know. It was, God, another 5 years, I guess, before they finally came through. And I finally got a settlement. They went from 10% to 40%. And I finally got a settlement for nearly $20,000 for retroactive. But I should have got it right back to the beginning. And I told the guy, I said, it should go right back to the beginning because $67, that's what I've been getting since about the middle 60s. So he says, yeah, but he said, you got to consider, that's the amount of money, if you go in there now and you're not satisfied with what you get, he said, they'll put that on a back shelf and you'll never see it, you'll be dead before they get it straightened out. So I settled for what I'm getting now, which is 40%. But I don't have to worry about going to the hospital. I mean, that'll be taken care of if I go to the VA.
So when were you discharged?
I was, that's another funny one. I was discharged on April the 1st, April Fool's Day, 1953. And at first I thought it was an April Fool's joke because I came in to New York in March 29th. That was Friday, I believe, or maybe it was, anyway, it was a Friday we hit New York, or Kilmer. And they weren't, the Army wasn't working for Friday, Saturday, they weren't working over the weekend. So we had to wait until Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday to be rotated out. So we figured we're gonna get time to go home, you know, weekend pass. Well, we're sitting around the barracks, and this sergeant come in, and he says, "You fellas want to go on leave over, you know, on a 3-day pass? You can come back Monday, a weekend pass?" "Yeah, sure." Well, like I said, I always had money in my pocket. I always made sure that I wasn't broke. Some of these guys had been in Germany for years and didn't have a dime for the subway to get home. And this son of a bitchin' sergeant was trying to hold us up to give the Red Cross $1 to join the Red Cross, and then he'd sign and give us our leave to go home. Well, I had the money, but I'd be a son of a bitch if he was going to wheel it out of me that way. I'd sat and I waited with the rest of them, you know. Since then, I've never given a goddamn dime to the Red Cross. As far as the Red Cross, they can go take a shit. But, I mean, we finally got our pass, and I was sent home, or I went home. Went over, in those days, you had to go from Camp Kilmer, which there was a bunch of us, so 4 or 5 of us grabbed a cab, and we split the cost of it, you know, take us into the train station there, and then you took the train into Penn Station. I guess Penn Station is gone now, I don't know. Then you had to take a cab from Penn Station to Grand Central. Well, I get out of Penn Station, I hop in a cab to go to Grand Central, and in those days the cab drivers had their picture and their license number, and it had to sit on the back of the driver's seat so that the customer could see the picture and the license. So I'm sitting there, and of course I'm in full uniform, and I looked at the picture and it said, "William T. Hunt." And I shook my head and looked again. I said to the guy, "Are you William T. Hunt?" He says, "I sure am, man." "How are you?" "I'm William A. Hunt." Of course, great big color guy, you know. Coincidence? I don't know. But I got a real kick out of that. But then on top of that, get over to Grand Central and got my train. And of course you come up to Albany Station those days. And I get off the train in Albany, and you had to come upstairs, and then you went through a big wing door, like, you know, to get into the station itself. And I walk in, and somebody hollers, "Hey, soldier." Who the hell's standing there but my brother? I hadn't seen him since I was overseas. He was in the service, but he was down in Aberdeen, Maryland, and he had come home, and my mother and father were on the way down to pick him up, not expecting me, so they pick up the 2 of us to go home. Next day, my father had it written up in the paper, "To Troy Brothers meet in Albany," you know. I should have brought it with me, but I missed it this morning. But anyway, that was quite a thrill. Come to find out, he was on the second section of the train that I was on, and we missed each other in like 20 minutes or something like that. But it was another time we were living in the tents, as I said. And in the wintertime over there's no real snow in France, but there was a lot of cold weather and damp weather. And you got to consider you're in France, it's either beer or wine, you know. And they had what they call a fire patrol between the tents, and somebody always had to be on fire patrol. And these we had 55-gallon drums between the tents with water in them in case one of the tents started on fire. You had a supply of water to, and they had antifreeze in the water so that you could at least use it, you know. So what the guys would do, they get these big demijohns of beer or wine or whatever, And when they'd emptied them, they had no place to put the bottles. So they'd stick them down into these 55-gallon drums, and of course the bottles would fill with the water and take them down to the bottom. Well, we got away with that for a long time, until one day the colonel come over and made an inspection, and I don't know how the hell he got the word, but he started tipping over 55-gallon drums, and there were empty beer bottles and empty wine bottles floating all over the company area.
Now, after you were discharged, did you use the GI Bill at all?
Yes, in fact, I went to, I think it was SUNY. I took a couple of IQ tests in Albany, and wound up that I was either a bank of tests, not just one, but a bank. I should either have been a baker or a funeral director. Yeah, they're all those tests that they come with. But they did tell me that I still am a crossword puzzle bug. And when you use a crossword puzzle, you pick up words, you know. And they told me at that time I was, what, 22, 23, something like that, that I had the vocabulary of a college graduate, which I thought was pretty good. But again, as I say, all of the banks of tests, it's just came back to funeral directing or a baker, because we had done that with the company. There was another time, I don't know, you fellas are probably too young to remember this, but during the Korean War, they had what they called the Longhorn Maneuver. The 101st Airborne. 101st Airborne was supposed to be the aggressors force, and the 1st Armored Division was defending. And the little towns around Fort Hood, Killeen, and can't think of the other names, but anyway, they were taken over by the aggressors. And I was with a squad, and we were down in Texas. You can go for miles and you don't see a tree, and then all of a sudden maybe there's a growth of trees. So anytime you hit a growth of trees, you use that for camouflage or whatever, you know, some kind of protection. And our squad, we were out on a search and recovery mission. The whole battalion, the whole division was on bivouac, and we were off by ourselves. And we set up this tent, and of course, you know where the drawstrings are on the side of the tent. You got maybe this much space. Well, the other fellows went into the camp to get to go for their mess, and I told them to bring me back a sandwich, because we couldn't leave the place unguarded, so I stayed as guard. And when I turned around, here, you know the longhorn cow is, well, I had about 8 or 10 of them. Now here, this stand of trees is in the middle of nowhere, all kinds of ground all the way around it, and these longhorns are heading right for the tent. I went up in a tree. I didn't know what the hell they were going to do, and they walked down that area where the sides of the tent's tied down, tearing up the stakes and and I stayed right up in that tree until they went. I didn't want to get in the way of those horns, no way.
Okay. Do you have any photographs you want to show? Just we're getting toward the end.
Okay.
You showed some of those.
This is, I'm on a bicycle here in Verdun, France. We had rented the bicycles just to run around the area and see what was. You might want to look at that. That's from the Patch, the newspaper. Another thing, when I got out of the service, they billed me for $16 and change. My mother got the bill, and I told her not to worry about it. Then finally they were going to call me back to pay that $16, because I had 72 days leave rather than 60, and I had to pay them back at a PFC's rate because I had got the stripe before I was discharged. So it didn't pay me to sew the stripes on. This is a picture in Verdun, France. Verdun was a big battle area of the First World War, and these are French heroes of that war.
Okay.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left on this.
Okay. Let's see, I don't know where there's any. Here's we're setting up a temporary cemetery. It was up in Grafenwehr, Germany, where we were training for,
Okay.
and trucks going along the Autobahn between Germany and Verdun.
Okay.
Another picture of the way the cemetery is laid out.
Okay, got it.
Usually a cemetery like that, it's 12 by 12, 144 graves in a
Why
plot.
don't you finish up with that photograph? Tell us about that one a little bit.
This is we were the Three Musketeers down in Fort Hood. That's Willie Shows, the first fella. That would be the left of the picture. The fellow in the middle is myself, and the other guy, pardon me, the other guy, oh gosh, I can't think of his name now. But anyway, the three of us were always together until this guy volunteered to go to Korea. Then it was just the two of us.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your interview.
I appreciate it, fellas.
Okay.